Before we get into the fate of Chucky Wanna Play, I'm going to briefly go over some of the history of the Child's Play franchise. Known to many horror enthusiasts as an iconic slasher series, Child's Play was created by Don Mancini, beginning life in 1985 when the first script would be written, fueled by a combination of inspirations ranging from the Cabbage Patch Dolls, a child's toy which was highly popular at the time, to Zuni, a doll from a 1975 anthology film called Trilogy of Terror, and a 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone dubbed Living Doll. Mancini's vision would see itself launched into cinemas in 1988 on November 9th in the USA and Canada, November 17th in Argentina, and this would be followed by a staggered release for all other countries throughout 1989 and 1990. The film opens with Detective Mike Norris and serial killer Charles Lee Ray, otherwise known to his friends as Chucky, locked in a shootout in the streets of Chicago, which eventually progresses into a toy store, with the latter being shot. With death close at hand, Chucky rips open the box to a good guy's doll. It becomes seemingly apparent that he knows some kind of magic, in this case the voodoo kind, as he begins performing a chant which is soon followed by a bolt of lightning shooting down upon the building, and thus signaling that the process is complete and his soul having now been transferred into an inanimate object, in this case the doll. And so is born the killer toy. The rest of the film sees Chucky causing mayhem, all whilst attempting to transfer his soul into the body of 6-year-old Andy. As it would later be revealed that the longer Chucky remains in his doll form, the more it becomes human-like, and with that, more vulnerable to injury, death, and also becoming trapped inside the confines of the doll itself. To counter this, he must transfer his life force into the first person he revealed his secrets to, you guessed it, Andy. The film would culminate with Mike, Andy, and his mum Karen taking down Chucky by blowing him to pieces. This would pave the way for a wave of sequels. One thing that always struck me as questionable was the lack of any video game set in the franchise's history. A killer toy doll that spews profanity seems like the perfect starting point for a game that could be molded to work with many popular different styles. That is of course with the exception of one game, Chucky Slash and Dash, being developed by Slimstown Studios and published by Universal Studios. It would be released on November 1st, 2013 on both Android and iOS devices. The game allows players to take on the role of either Chucky or his bride Tiffany. No matter the choice though, the gameplay is identical. It's an endless runner wearing a Child's Play skin. The player attempts to avoid obstacles and at times is able to kill security guards. Included are a variety of weapons, and instead of collecting coins, which is common in endless runners, the collectibles are batteries used to unlock items such as power-ups. Unsurprisingly, the title didn't receive great reviews. Going back some years prior to this, in May of 2011, another game was previously in development, Chucky Wanna Play, by a company known as Tick Games. Tick Games was founded in 2002 by Anatoly Tickman. The company would see the release of various apps and many casual type games for a range of platforms, including the Android, iOS, PC, Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, and various other systems. With the rights to publish the game based on Child's Play already acquired,
Tick Games has acquired the Child's Play Chucky license, and we're making a slasher game.
and with an alleged estimated budget of only $500,000 to bring the project to life, a Kickstarter campaign would be launched on the 16th of October 2012 in hopes of gaining more funding to the figure of an extra $925,000, which if acquired would have raised the total budget to $1,425,000. This made me wonder though, why was a Kickstarter for a company that is apparently successful, from their own admission, even needed? A few reasons could include licensing fees. They vary, but often they can be pricey, depending on a few factors. For example, the popularity of an IP is likely to drive the cost of acquirement up. They'd already paid this low, so maybe the licensing fee ate up most of that $500,000. Their previous successes were based on much smaller games, thus likely to see smaller returns compared to that of AAA type games, and in turn, less ability to fund a bigger game. Chucky Wanna Play was a vast departure from their usual casual style, and so possibly needing to recruit more employees to bear the load, which would have meant more people to pay. In the Kickstarter promotional trailer, their reasoning is,
making awesome gameplay with crazy graphics and lots of blood and gore is really expensive for a medium-sized company like ours.
I have another possible reason, but I'll come back to that after I give some more information on their campaign. As mentioned, I can't help but wonder how much of that original $500,000 budget was already used in not only acquiring the rights, but also to produce some of the already made assets that would be shown in the Kickstarter trailer. This is unknown as they never released any information on this subject, at least none that I could find at the time of making this video. A total of 12 tiers were present for backers to choose from when deciding to pledge to the Kickstarter, the lowest tier starting at $15 going all the way up to the highest level, which would cost $10,000. As is the Kickstarter way, rewards are used to incite people to be more generous. In this case, the base pledge of $15 included a digital copy of the game and expanding to offer additional rewards the higher the user chose to pledge, such as digital goodies, including the soundtrack, concept book, strategy guide, and high-definition images to be used for printing. Other rewards included physical items, for example, framed pictures. Some later tiers included the chance to have your own image in-game, and the highest level rewards included the chance to talk to the developers and be able to give them your views on the ideas and concepts used in the game. You'd also be able to attend the launch party. Less than a week later, on the 22nd of October, the Kickstarter would be cancelled. During the lifespan of the page, Tick Games would see themselves acquiring just 19 backers, 11 of those pledging to the $15 tier, 3 pledging to the $30 tier, 1 pledging to the $50 tier, 2 pledging to the $75 tier, and 1 pledging to the $100 tier. Coming back to the other possible reason I alluded to earlier when regarding the need for a Kickstarter, and whilst one would hope this is not the case, it's something that should be at least entertained, if only briefly. Was it a scam? Were they hoping to make a lot of cash on an empty promise and flee into the sunset? Kickstarter isn't an infallible service. Each project comes with some risk to the backer. There are stories of projects having previously raised funds, then failing to deliver on what was promised, and the creators vanished with the money. Tick Games was and still is an established company, so it's less likely this was the case. However, the fact that the campaign was shut down so fast seems odd, or at least leaves me wondering why, considering they had actually put work into the game. However, it could be they just wanted to cut their losses. Also, again, this is a company that had apparent success. Based on that, I feel like they should have had the ability to fund the amount they asked for themselves. Perhaps they just didn't want to risk their own money on a potential flop. If this was the reason, that would itself not be a scam, but in my view, very parasitic at least. So was it a scam? It's always a possibility, but as no money was taken by Tick Games from the campaign, it's not really a concern to look too deeply into. Ultimately, the game would be cancelled. As I mentioned, it seemed odd that the campaign was so short-lived when Tick Games had actually put work into the project already. We're not just talking about concepts that had been written down into a neat presentation, but an actual prototype, and in 2023 that prototype would find its way to the public. A user going by the handle of Riley5411 would find a build of the game supposedly on a dev kit they'd found for the Xbox 360, and on the 18th of February that year uploaded it to a website known as the Internet Archive. The gameplay footage you're about to see is what I captured whilst playing that build. The game begins with a short introduction in the style of a comic book, explaining that the story takes place some years after the first movie, and then divulges that some of Chucky's blood accidentally mixed with a new batch of good guy dolls, birthing their body once more for him. We're then told that Chucky has returned back to the building where Andy's apartment was located, hoping he can finish the ritual that would see him finally take over the body of Andy. The level opens up in a child's bedroom, with the player now free to control Chucky. The controls are what you'd expect from a third-person action game. Based on an Xbox 360 controller, the left joystick functions to control the basic directional movements, whilst the right joystick controls the direction the camera is to face. X works as a simple attack that will cycle through a few different animations whilst wielding Chucky's iconic knife. A performs a jump. Y serves as an alternative function for secondary items such as using a baseball bat once collected. B serves to interact with objects such as opening doors. RB allows the player to roll, and in doing so dodge incoming attacks. RT allows the player to crouch, engaging the stealth mechanic. LB enables a ragdoll and makes Chucky drop to the floor to give the impression of an ordinary harmless child's toy. LT enables a target mode, and pressing in the right joystick allows a type of knife mode. This allows Chucky to hold his knife up and forces a slower paced movement whilst allowing the player a greater degree of control over their aim. There are no in-depth explanations on how to do things, and minimal information is offered towards how some of the mechanics work, whilst others lack any information at all. However, with some experimentation, it becomes somewhat obvious how these are designed to function. For example, you can obtain an item that is designed to work as a tripwire trap, the end result being that an NPC can fall over, and this leaves the door open for a quick kill. It will also trip Chucky over should the player walk into it themselves. Another example being the stealth system. While stealthy is pressed, Chucky will go into a crouched position as he moves around, and this will make foggy looking areas become visible to the player. It's not explained, but I assume these areas are safe for the player to traverse without being noticed. The game also includes a stealth attack option as well. If the player can position themselves unnoticed behind an NPC, a one-hit kill can be performed. The player is, however, not forced nor punished if they choose to go with a more direct and louder style of play. That is with the exception of a scoreboard at the end of the level that will tally the player's gameplay style. If choosing to run out and attack NPCs is your preferred method, there's no game over or restarting. The NPCs, however, will fight back, attempting to kick you away, and yes, you can die if you take enough damage. Another note regarding the level itself, as far as I could remember, shared no resemblance to the interior of the building shown in the movie. For example, we don't see the elevator Chucky manages to ride in with the elderly couple. However, again, this was a very early build and likely could have changed to be more familiar later on. The player's goal is to maneuver their way around the apartment complex, going through various hallways, communal areas, vents, and numerous apartments in hopes to reach Andy's old apartment. Upon finally reaching this destination, looking nothing like the layout scene in the movie, Chucky will be greeted by 3 voodoo priests of sorts that have been waiting for Chucky to arrive in hopes to stop him. Once disposing of these, a boss fight will commence and the player will find themselves trying to destroy a bizarrely huge being called Mambo. Whilst looking into this, I found out that Mambo is a priestess who can function as a healer, a guide in the religion, and a spiritual leader. Bringing an end to this boss is necessary in order to obtain a piece of an amulet. Based on Chucky's dialogue,
I need that amulet piece. I gotta get out of this weird body. Hey Oprah, don't you know you're not supposed to wear your good jewelry in this neighborhood?
though not directly mentioned, it can be surmised that this is indeed a piece of the heart of Dumbala. This is what Chucky uses in the movies when attempting to transfer his soul. The key to victory is relatively simple. You attack 4 statues that grant Mambo invincibility. Once all these are disabled, you are able to unleash a wave of attacks directly upon the boss. After a few attacks, the cycle will begin again, and the player needs to simply repeat the same process. As you progress, there are slight variations such as distractions, including the dreaded chickens, whom I had a lot of trouble dealing with as they were almost undodgeable and took a few hits to destroy. Not to mention, once they make an appearance, they will keep respawning until you defeat the boss, finding myself doomed to repeat this cycle numerous times until I finally vanquished said chickens. My overall impressions of the prototype were mixed. I had the most fun trying to sneak around the complex, attempting to perform takedowns and cause mayhem by jumping out at the NPCs. My least enjoyed portions included areas that took away from this, such as a weird supernatural type event in one hallway where enemies will temporarily rush at you, and another was the boss fight, which also felt out of place to me. These 2 examples just felt tacked on, not to mention it seemed odd that some voodoo priest would take over the tenancy of Andy's mum's old apartment in case Chucky should ever return, when he had apparently been dead for some years at the time the story takes place. Whether the game would have been a direct continuation for the first Child's Play movie and ignored its sequels isn't stated. However, I concluded that this is the most likely case, as the intro states the story takes place some years after the first movie's events. During Child's Play 2, which takes place around 2 years after the first movie, Andy, now being 8 years old, was in foster care and would be in and out of foster homes in the years leading up to Child's Play 3, which takes place when Andy is 16. So, it seems unlikely Andy would have returned to the apartment he lived in with his mother during the first film. Although it's possible Tick Games would have changed story elements later to be more accurate, as in the Kickstarter trailer they claim they are fans of Chucky, and so I assume they would know the timelines and stories of the movies. Why was the game cancelled? Most articles I've read online allude to the Kickstarter's failure being the reason. A statement from Tick Games at the time also confirmed this. It is with great sadness that we announce the cancellation of this Kickstarter campaign. For those who have followed Chucky this last week, you know that pledges have been very slow. We built a fun campaign with lots of great goodies, got the word out to as many people as we could, but sadly not enough people loved the concept of a Chucky video game as much as we did. The Kickstarter campaign ran for a very short span of time, again as mentioned before, starting on October 16th and ending on the 22nd that same month. From the statement given, I surmised that Tick Games expected a much faster reaction to the announcement of their Kickstarter, and when that didn't turn out to be the case, they shut it down. Why the Kickstarter failed at obtaining backers isn't obvious. Tick Games claimed they'd reached out to those they knew to get the ball rolling on spreading the word, yet activity was still minimal. Tick Games was also not an unknown entity. As discussed earlier, the company has had many games and apps released since its formation in 2002. From their list of games that I've looked through, it would seem, however, all those I looked at are not major releases. Based on this, it's very possible that could have stunted their reach to shine light on their Kickstarter campaign. I myself had never heard of the company or their Chucky project until a few months ago. Looking at comments posted on their statement regarding the cancellation of the game, it can be seen that other people had not heard of the project either. This makes me wonder how many more people were unaware of their campaign and why. Could it be that because Tick Games had never made a major selling game before, that people did not have faith they could achieve a solid product? Or perhaps their brand just wasn't well known enough by the general public due to their lack of any releases that held substance, and in turn, no one had widely heard of their Kickstarter. Or maybe at the time, as mentioned in their post, people just weren't excited for a Chucky game. I tend to doubt that reason though. Chucky has been a beloved character to many horror fans over the decades. Whether that would have been enough to make the game a success financially is unsure. More than likely though, a portion of those fans would have welcomed the attempt of a third-person slasher game starring the happy-go-lucky bloodthirsty doll, and so they would have likely acquired much more backers for their Kickstarter. Their point about there being no interest in a Chucky game, I view this as an excuse to quietly cancel the Kickstarter when they saw it wasn't going as hoped, and possibly a way to ease the blow to their ego, with pretense attempting to sweep away embarrassment, as the failure of their Kickstarter was and still is information publicly available today. As mentioned previously, they had no wild successes or massively popular games. All of their releases that I could see were very casual games that I'd never heard of before. Does that mean none were popular? No. Could it be I missed one of their games that was wildly successful? Yes. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. If we follow the train of thought that they had no real successes, this would dampen their reach and in turn make them more unknown to the masses than they may have believed themselves to have been. If they were to attempt another Kickstarter again, with the proper steps taken to achieve coverage of the project, and also combined with Chucky still being actively popular today, in part due to recent outings of the Child's Play franchise for our TV series and an appearance of said character in the video game Dead by Daylight as a playable killer, both of which have likely helped Chucky to be introduced to a whole new generation. Following these thoughts, I'd like to believe Tick Games would be more successful. In conclusion, I believe their campaign failed simply because of poor marketing, their lack of ability to execute the campaign effectively, and finally, but most importantly, the lack of public awareness that came with their brand. As usual, these are my own thoughts and assumptions. Earlier, I mentioned that I'd never heard of this project until a few months ago, which makes me wonder, had you heard of Chucky Wanna Play? Would you have liked to see the game released, or do you think that it would have failed either way? Let me know in the comments. I'll be putting out more videos about cancelled games and other subjects in the future, so if you want to explore more of those with me, feel free to do so by clicking the subscribe button. And with that, we've looked at some of the Child's Play franchise, and then this runner that failed to hit the mark, and a game that was fated to fall before it could take form. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'm Howard Laird. I'm head of game design at Tick Games. We've been making really cool video games for over a decade. Child's Play's own Chucky has never been brought to the video game world. But all that's going to change with your help.